Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling loneliness, not just, the feeling, but loneliness as a serious, measurable health risk, a major one.
Absolutely. It's shifting from something purely emotional to something, well, quantifiable, like a vital sign almost.
Exactly. And our mission today, we're diving into this big 10-year study, it's by Fan and colleagues, just out in 2025. They used data from the huge health and retirement study, the HRS, and they wanted to know, how much does loneliness actually predict dying early, specifically, before age 85 for folks aged 50 to 84?
Yeah. It's a critical question, and to get clinical about it, we need clear terms. The study focuses specifically on loneliness. That's the subjective distress, that feeling when your social connections just aren't what you want or need them to be. It's internal.
Right, which is different from social isolation.
Totally different. Social isolation is objective. How many friends do you actually have? Do you live alone? Loneliness is that gap, that feeling inside. And here's the hook, the bit that really makes you sit up. This study suggests the health hit from loneliness is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
15, wow.
Yeah. And it poses a greater mortality risk than obesity or not getting enough exercise.
Okay, that's staggering. Let's unpack that. If feeling lonely is that dangerous, we need to know how they measured it and, crucially, who's most at risk. How did the study actually work?
Well, it was a solid setup. They had, 6,392 participants, all aged between 50 and 84 at the start, and they followed them over 10 years, from the 2010 wave to the 2020 wave of the HRS data. The key outcome was early mortality, dying before hitting 85.
Okay, big group, long time frame. But how do you put a number on loneliness? It feels so personal.
They used a well-established tool, the 11-item UCLA loneliness scale, the UCLA 11. Think of it as a detailed questionnaire. It gets at different facets of that internal distress. Scores run from 11 up to 33, and they basically grouped people. Low or no loneliness, mild, moderate, and severe based on those scores.
Got it. So what did they find overall? What was the death rate?
The overall mortality rate across a decade was 19.1 deaths per 1,000 person years.
Person years. Right, that just means tracking deaths relative to how long everyone was actually in the study, a standard measure.
Exactly. It gives you a reliable rate.
And did that rate connect back to the loneliness scores?
Oh, absolutely. There was a clear, significant dose-response relationship, meaning the higher someone scored on that loneliness scale, the higher the risk of dying before 85, persistently higher.
And this wasn't just because lonely people might also be, say, older or sicker to begin with?
Great question. No, that's the key. They controlled for a ton of other factors: age, sex, whether they were married, education level, drinking habits, existing physical diseases, depression, insomnia, even cognitive function. They adjusted for all of it.
Wait, they adjusted for depression too. So are they saying loneliness is a killer completely separate from depression?
That's precisely the implication. By statistically removing the influence of depression and those other factors, they could isolate loneliness itself as an independent risk. And the numbers were pretty stark. Even after all those adjustments, people with moderate loneliness had a 23% higher risk of mortality.
23%. How do they express that statistically?
They use the adjusted hazard ratio, or AHR. For moderate loneliness, the AHR was 1.23. Think of it as a multiplier effect on your risk, even accounting for everything else. And for severe loneliness, scores 21 to 33, the risk jumped even higher, an AHR of 1.36. So a 36% higher risk of dying before 85, purely linked to that severe level of loneliness.
Okay, so the overall picture is clear. More loneliness, higher risk, even when you account for other health issues. But you said it gets really interesting when you break it down by age.
Exactly. The association wasn't uniform across the lifespan. It changed quite dramatically depending on which age bracket people were in.
Right, life circumstances change. So let's break down those age groups. Where did they start?
They started with the middle-aged group, 50 to 64-year-old. Their mortality rate was the lowest, about 9.8 per 1,000 person years. But here's the surprising part. For this 50 to 64 group, once they adjusted for health and other factors, well, there was no significant link found between any level of loneliness and dying early.
None.
Yeah.
So if you're, say, 60 and feel really lonely, this study suggests it doesn't actually raise your statistical risk of dying before 85, assuming you're otherwise reasonably healthy.
Statistically, yes. That seems to be the finding. The researchers think it might be protective factors at that stage. Generally better baseline health, maybe stronger social ties through work, kids still around, things that might buffer that internal feeling.
Interesting. Okay, what about the next group up, the young old?
Ages 65 to 74. Here, the mortality rate jumps up quite a bit, 25.1 per 1,000 person years. And here, the risk starts to appear. But importantly, only at the very top end. Only severe loneliness showed a consistent, significant link to mortality.
So mild or moderate loneliness still wasn't predictive in this group.
Not after full adjustment, no. It seems the threshold for risk is higher for the young old. The loneliness has to be quite profound to register as a mortality risk factor.
Okay, so risk emerges, but only at the extreme. But then the final group, 75 to 84, the old. What happens there?
This is where the picture changes dramatically. And honestly, it's the most concerning finding. Their mortality rate is the highest, obviously 42.5 per 1,000 person years. But the key thing is, in this 75 to 84 group, the risk threshold just collapses. All levels of loneliness, mild, moderate, and severe, significantly increase the risk of dying before 85.
All levels, even mild.
Even mild. The protective buffers seem to vanish. And severe loneliness in this group. It carried the highest risk seen in the entire study, an AHR of 1.77.
Wow. That's a 77% higher relative risk of death compared to non-lonely peers in the same age bracket.
Exactly. It's a massive increase.
So the takeaway seems to be, as you get older, particularly past 75, loneliness itself, regardless of severity, becomes this pervasive and deadly risk factor.
That's what the data strongly suggests. The vulnerability increases. Maybe it's mounting health issues, losing a spouse, retirement, cutting off networks. These age-related factors seem to make even mild loneliness much more dangerous.
It's still hard to wrap your head around a feeling being so lethal, which leads to the big question, how? How does loneliness actually harm the body, and why does age make it so much worse? What are the mechanisms?
Right. It's not magic. There are concrete pathways. The researchers point to about 4 major interconnected mechanisms. It's systemic.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is the psychosocial pathway. This draws a bit on evolutionary ideas. Loneliness acts like a danger signal. The person feels unsafe, hypervigilant to social threats. This chronic sense of insecurity can actually lead to behaviors that push people further away, reinforcing the isolation, and it triggers biological stress responses.
Which connects directly to the second pathway, I assume, the physical stuff.
Precisely. The physiological pathway. That constant threat signal does real damage. Loneliness is linked directly to higher rates of chronic diseases, diabetes, heart problems, stroke, even some cancers. It seems to keep your stress systems, like cortisol production, running on high alert all the time. This causes chronic inflammation, wears down the immune system, and basically accelerates aging at a cellular level.
And if you're already 78 with some underlying health conditions, that extra inflammatory load, that constant stress, that could be the tipping point.
Exactly. Then third, there's the behavioral pathway. It's about coping, often in unhealthy ways. Lonely individuals are statistically more likely to adopt poor health habits. Things like poor diet, being less physically active, maybe increased smoking or drinking. These directly harm health.
Makes sense. Maladaptive coping. What's the fourth pathway?
The mental health pathway. Loneliness doesn't just feel bad, it actively harms the brain. It's been shown to accelerate cognitive decline, and cognitive impairment is a huge risk factor for mortality in older adults, often overlooked. Plus, it worsens conditions like clinical depression and anxiety, which are themselves linked to shorter lifespans. It's a vicious cycle.
Okay, so psychosocial stress, direct physiological damage, risky behaviors, and worsening mental and cognitive health.
Yeah.
A four-pronged attack.
Pretty much sums it up.
So knowing this, especially the huge risk for the 75-plus group, what can you, the listener, or maybe healthcare providers, actually do? What are the actionable takeaways?
Well, the first implication is pretty clear. We need to start screening for this routinely. Loneliness assessment should probably become a standard part of health checkups for middle-aged and older adults, especially during big life changes, retirement, bereavement, major moves.
And the interventions need to be smart, right? Because the study showed the risk varies so much by age.
Absolutely. Targeted intervention is key. For the young old, that 65 to 74 group, the focus should really be on identifying and helping those with severe loneliness, because that's where the risk was concentrated.
But for the old, 75 and up.
For the 75 to 84 group, you need a broader approach. Because all levels of loneliness were risky, the care plan needs to address even mild or moderate feelings, and the interventions themselves. The study suggests we need to think beyond just, say, organizing more bingo nights, meaning strategies that just focus on increasing objective social contact often aren't enough. Multifaceted approaches seem better. Things like social skills training, cognitive behavioral therapy to change negative thought patterns about social interaction, psychological support. Even things like animal therapy showed promise. It's about the quality and perception, not just quantity.
That leads perfectly into something else I found fascinating, a detail about how they measured loneliness that
Yeah.
really changes things. They compared that full 11-item scale with a shorter 3-item version, right?
Yes, this is a really critical methodological point. They did a sensitivity analysis using the common UCLA 3 scale, and the results were striking. Using the full UCLA 11, loneliness was a strong predictor of mortality. But when they used the short UCLA 3, the significant association basically vanished in the fully adjusted model.
Wow. So the short scale missed the mark. Why? What's the difference?
Well, the UTLA 3 mainly taps into symptoms of objective isolation. It asks things like, do you feel you lack companionship? But do you feel left out? Res, could you be isolated? It's closer to asking, are you alone? Okay. But the UCLA 11 is broader. It includes those questions, sure, but it adds items about feeling understood, about having people you can turn to, about feeling in tune with others. It captures a deeper sense of belonging, not just the absence of company.
So just asking if someone feels left out isn't enough. It's the whole cluster of feelings, not having companionship, Andy, not feeling like you belong, not feeling understood, that predicts mortality.
That's exactly what this suggests. It's the overall weight of those combined feelings, that global sense of mismatch between desired and actual connection quality, captured by the full scale, that carries the risk. Not just one or two symptoms of being alone.
And that really clarifies things. Okay, let's try to sum this up. We have strong evidence. Loneliness is a significant predictor of dying before age 85. It works like a dose, more loneliness, more risk.
Right. And critically, its impact hits hardest and broadest in the oldest group, those 75 to 84, where even mild loneliness becomes a significant risk factor.
We should also mention a limitation the authors noted, shouldn't we?
Yes, definitely. They only measured loneliness at the very beginning of the 10-year period at baseline. So we can't really tell from the study if someone felt lonely briefly versus being chronically lonely for the entire decade. That difference likely matters a lot, but this study design couldn't capture that trajectory. Future research needs longitudinal measurement.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to end on, building on that measurement point. If the total score on the comprehensive UCLA 11 predicts death, but the individual symptoms of just being alone from the shorter scale don't, what does that tell us? It suggests the lethal risk isn't just about lacking company, it's about lacking belonging. So the question for you and for future research is, what specific pattern within those 11 symptoms is most dangerous? Is it feeling misunderstood? Is it not having anyone to turn to? What precise aspects of connection, beyond just having people around, are truly essential for a longer life? Decoding that belonging cluster seems crucial.